Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're unraveling, pun totally intended, a topic that causes a whole lot of headaches but is so incredibly rewarding once you nail it. We're looking at 10 common crochet mistakes and, more importantly, exactly how to fix them. Whether you're picking up a hook for the very first time or you've been stitching for years, we're going to dive right into the most frustrating crochet pitfalls and give you the actionable fixes you need to craft with complete confidence.
So, be honest, have you ever set out to crochet a nice, simple rectangle and somehow ended up with a hexagon? Yeah, you're definitely not alone in this. We've all started an easy project with high hopes, thinking, oh, this is going to be a breeze, just repeating the same stitch back and forth, but then after an hour of mindless stitching while watching TV, you look down and watch its shape morph into something completely unexpected. It's incredibly frustrating, right?
That sudden realization usually leads to a phrase that sends shivers down any crafter's spine. Welcome to Frogtown. Having to rip out rows and rows of hard work, what crafters affectionately call going to Frogtown, because you have to rip it, is a painful rite of passage. You've basically just made and then completely unraveled a whole project. But don't worry, today we're going to learn exactly how to avoid a trip to Frogtown.
All right, let's get into Section 1, Perfecting Your Prep, the Foundation.
The real secret to a successful project actually happens before your hook even touches the yarn. There are 3 absolute must-do steps here. First, read the entire pattern like you're studying for a test. You don't have to memorize it, but skimming ahead gives you crucial context and prevents confusion later on. Second, double-check the terminology. And third, always make that crucial gauge swatch. Let's talk about that terminology for a second, because mixing this up is a total disaster. What the US calls a single crochet, the UK actually calls a double crochet. Mind-blowing, right? If you don't verify which terms your pattern uses before diving in, you could end up using entirely different stitches. That will completely ruin your project's shape and size right out of the gate.
Another massive prep trap, picking the wrong yarn. Seriously, steer clear of velvet, chenille, eyelash, boucle, and really dark colors when you're starting out or learning a new technique. Why? Well, if you actually want to see your stitches and learn their structure, you absolutely need a smooth, medium-weight, light-colored yarn. Fuzzy, heavily textured, or dark yarns make your work practically impossible to read, meaning you can't tell where your hook is actually supposed to go.
And bringing it back to that gauge swatch we mentioned earlier, skipping it is a huge gamble. If you skip it, that wearable garment you're making might not even fit. This one simple little square determines if your tension matches the designer's tension. If it doesn't, a sweater might turn out way too big or way too small, wasting dozens of hours of effort. If your tension is off, you simply adjust your hook size up or down until it matches perfectly.
Moving right along to Section 2, Surviving the Middle Slog, or Execution.
Now we're getting into the physical act of building your fabric, which is where some of the sneakiest mistakes happen. Inconsistent tension, like holding your yarn way too tightly or way too loosely, makes your fabric weirdly rigid or overly floppy. But if you keep your hands and shoulders relaxed and focus on slow, steady movements, you'll create beautifully even and consistent stitches. It makes a world of difference.
When you're starting your foundation chain, a classic pitfall is slip-knot placement. You really want to slide it up so it sits right on the widest part of the hook's shaft, not down by the throat. This simple little adjustment prevents your very first loop from becoming impossibly tight.
And you know, that exact same rule applies to your yarn overs. A super common execution mistake is yarning over too tightly, right near the tip of the hook. Do that, and your starting chain pulls inward, turning into an absolute nightmare to work into on the next row. Once that foundation is finally complete, pay very close attention to your second row. Placing your very first stitch in the wrong chain throws your entire stitch count off from the absolute get-go. It's a tiny mistake that totally snowballs as your project grows. Which naturally leads us to an absolutely non-negotiable rule in crochet execution. Count your stitches and count your rows. Honestly, skipping this is exactly how your rectangle magically turns into a hexagon. Please don't rely on your memory while you're distracted watching a movie. Use a digital clicker, put in stitch markers every 10 stitches, or just keep a simple pin and notepad handy to track your rows so you don't accidentally crochet 5 extra ones. Now, let's talk about the edges of your project. Ever noticed your piece gradually getting narrower? Missing the turning chain gives you those squished, pulled-in edges, so always remember to add the correct number of chains for the specific stitch type before starting a new row. A single crochet needs 1 chain, A half double needs 2, and a double crochet needs 2 to 3 chains just to get that row up to the proper height. Here's another crucial structural golden rule. Crochet under both loops. When you look at the top of your stitches, they look like little V's. Unless a pattern specifically tells you to work in the front loop only, accidentally catching just one loop is a classic novice mistake. It creates this unintended ridged texture that drastically alters the fabric structure and strength. Take the extra second to make sure your hook slides under both strands. All right, we made it to section 3, finishing like a pro, the polish.
You've survived the middle slog, you've stitched your final row, but you aren't quite done yet. Let's diagnose a quick structural issue. Got crooked edges? If your sides look wavy, uneven, or start forming a triangle, you are almost certainly skipping that sneaky, hidden last stitch of each row. That final stitch loves to curl downward and hide, making it so easy to miss. Pro tip, using a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of every single row is the perfect fix.
When you're finally ready to cut your yarn and bind off, 5 to 6 inches is the absolute minimum you need to leave for your yarn tail. I know it's tempting, but cutting it too short because you're eager to be totally finished is a huge mistake. A tiny tail means you're going to struggle to weave it in securely, and your beautiful project could literally unravel over time. So, how do we finish properly? Step 1. Secure those long tails by weaving them back and forth through your stitches with a yarn needle. Don't just go in one straight line. And step 2, block your project. Seriously, never skip blocking. It magically evens out the tension of your stitches and drastically improves the final shape and drape of your piece. It is the ultimate polish. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. Look, every single crocheter, from total beginner to seasoned expert, makes these blunders at some point. It's practically guaranteed. The real key is knowing how to spot them and how to correct them. So, now that you're armed with these solutions, I've got to ask, which mistake will you fix first? What technique are you going to apply to your very next project to make it your absolute best one yet?